joining me right now, Charlie Kirk, founder of a really awesome organization, Turning Point USA, that engages and flips the switch of all of these collegiate people all across the country, gets them engaged, and he's got a new book out, The MAGA Doctrine. I just like the book cover because Trump's hugging a flag, and I like that book cover. I remember that moment too. His brand new book, which is out now, and of course, he's been following all of this and commenting on it. Charlie, always good to have you. Congrats on the book. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Honored to be here, Dana. Thanks so much.
Of course. I know you've been watching this Chinese propaganda war as well. I have to get your thoughts on the number of journalists. Now, not all, but there's a significant number of individuals that are trading on their credibility, and they are ignoring all of these actual things that China has done that contribute directly to the spread of this pandemic and accusing the United States of doing it. And they're going after the administration and ignoring these, actual serious offenses. What is your take on all of this?
Yeah, I've been calling it the Chinese virus for a couple of weeks now. And when I came right out of the gate and said that, I was under huge backlash from the kind of left-wing intelligentsia. But, China lied about this. China did not handle this correctly in their own country. They basically have now infected the entire world, and they need to be held accountable and held responsible. And I've said for a while, China's our greatest enemy. They're not our friend. They're not our ally. The fact we still trade with them as much as we do needs to be completely and totally reconsidered. We have sanctions against Iran. We have sanctions against Russia, but we just treat China as if they're this wonderful friend of ours. Mm-hmm. They lie as a feature of their society. And look, we as conservatives, we need to be honest with ourselves that over the last 20, 30 years, we, under the idea of free market absolutism, and I'm a Milton Friedman capitalist free market guy, we just turned a blind eye against China. Yeah. But sometimes national security outweighs any sort of market forces. And now our health security, our economic security have all been put into jeopardy because of our connection to the Chinese Communist Party. And these are unethical, sinister individuals that have been running the tyrannical Chinese Communist Party for some time. And one final point on this, I was watching the press briefing. I was very proud of the president for how he was standing up against that ridiculous left-wing journalist that said, well, don't you think this is racist?
Oh, yes.
And I thought to myself, my goodness, if this is not an example of how the left cares more about trying to find their phantom ghost of racism than saving lives in the midst of the pandemic, is that not more just more evidence of that's what the left actually cares about more than anything else, trying to make Trump look insensitive than actually trying to save lives? And that was is reprehensible.
A great point as well. And it makes me think of a number of my friend Buck Sexton also made a great point where he said there's a strong correlation right now between journalists who falsely claimed for 3 years that Trump was, quote unquote, doing Putin's bidding, and those who are now doing Xi Jinping's bidding by spreading this Wuhan coronavirus propaganda on behalf of Beijing. Irony must be dead.
Yeah, no doubt. And look, this intelligentsia journalist class, they seem so irritated that Donald Trump is now telling the truth about the origins of the virus. But let's be honest with ourselves. Ebola, West Nile, Spanish flu, these are all regions, rivers, or portions of the world. We always name
there's a St. Louis virus for crying out loud. Yeah.
Yes, precisely. And for reason, because sometimes it can be instructive of where the virus came from.
Right.
And it also just goes to the point of evidence that this is nothing new. It's not as if we just decided to call it that because it just happened to be China.
Right.
However, you even made a better point that it's actually unfair to call some of these other viruses by their region because China's actually contributed more to the spread of the virus than any other virus in the last 100 years.
Right.
It wasn't like when the Spanish flu was spread, there was, a Spanish ruling class that tried to cover it up. It was pretty well known that it was happening, and this is different. China could have done something very simple. When they had 100 cases, when they had 1,000 cases, they're not stupid. They're sinister, but they're not stupid. They know how infectious diseases work. Yeah. They could have said, hey, we got a pandemic happening in our own country. We're closing off the borders. You guys should too. We're going to close down factories. Can you help us? And guess what? The world would have said, oh, my gosh, we don't want that in our country. Instead, they lied about it. This is early as November. This was spreading. And that means that, by the way, this has been in our country for a lot longer than we realized.
Oh, yes.
And look, this is going to be I don't know where this is going to end up. I have no idea where this is going to land, but I could tell you that the Chinese could have blunted this. They could have stunted it, And instead, we are in the midst of something that there is no playbook for.
Absolutely.
This is something that is now of the economic carnage that can only be compared to the 2008 financial crisis or 9/11.
Yeah, and we are going to be dealing with the fallout of it for some time. But thankfully, we at least, I'm happy that we have somebody in the White House that understands economics. You discuss your new book, and I want to make sure I touch on this as well. Your new book, The MAGA Doctrine, and like I said, I really like the book cover. The only ideas that will win the future. I remember when Trump first really started seriously doing the push for the presidential run, and this was maybe back in 2013. And he talked a lot about China at the time. And it seemed to, particularly to the left, and then there were certain aspects of the GOP that did not necessarily take it as seriously as I think it needed to be taken. And I'm wondering, because I know that you get into all of this in the book, these ideas that really, I mean, it's one of the reasons why it was the party was able to build a big tent, but because he was focusing on policies and trade and manufacturing and economics. But do you think that history is going to judge Trump to be astute on this? Because I remember when he suspended just in the beginning of January, when he was talking about suspending flights to China, he was railed on by the press as a racist. And now everyone's finally crediting that action for saving thousands of American lives. And when he's been talking about trade and manufacturing with China for several years now, are we at the point now where people are going to take this seriously? Is history going to judge him in being correct? And will we finally get to the point where we can stop relying on the cheap, instant gratification market from China?
Look, it's so many great points there, Dana. Yes, I wrote this book because I felt that someone needed to articulate the philosophical defense of the Trump presidency. And now with this virus, whether we like it or not, this virus will determine his presidency and decide his presidency. He's a phenomenal leader. He's going to get through this, and he's going to be known as someone who killed the invisible killer. And that's and by the way, that's going to be something that I don't think any other president in recent memory could have done this. And this only shows his two big issues: reliance on China and anti-globalism, and immigration are now playing out right now. And I think only reinforces his original instincts and what he's tried to do to actually make America sovereign and to challenge some of our endless and limitless immigration policies, and also challenge China. And so this is a win for him in that sense. But look, as far as his legacy goes, we are now at a point, and I didn't think we would get here, to be honest with you. When we were at CPAC a couple weeks ago, I thought this thing would have normalized, flattened the curve. We're 30% down on the Dow. I mean, people are seeing their life savings disappear. Mm-hmm. President Trump rebuilt this economy once. He'll rebuild it again, and he have to. And he will. He'll be the only president in American history to have rebuilt the American economy twice, and he'll do it. And that's the type of leader that he is. And I want every American to know, to have the optimism that's what's going to happen. Unemployment's going to go up. We're going to go into a recession. There's no beating around the bush. And guess what? He's going to go again, and he'll be able to say, I got us the lowest ever black unemployment rate twice. And that's going to be a great thing for him to say. This is out of his control. He tried to shut down the borders. He's tried to be skeptical of China. The American people are going to give him a lot of breathing room. And I think the more that he goes to these press conferences and he tells the truth, the better. And by the way, the amount of stress that he's under, I mean, my goodness, there's no playbook for this. Mm-mm. No playbook. I mean, in a traditional ground war, there's a playbook. You've got generals that have been around for 150, 150 years
Sun
of
Tzu it,
conventional
yes.
warfare. Yeah, and you kind of have an expectation what's going to happen. There's no playbook here. You have economic carnage happening simultaneously with people dying, people getting infected. He's going to be able, in my opinion, to tell a story that he brought together the entire country and the United States government and fought something that the country has never seen before successfully. And I think that is the MAGA doctrine. I think your intro is spot on that.
One last quick question for you. And one of the reasons why I think it's important for what you have done in articulating the philosophical basis of his politics and really the era that we are in as it relates to republicanism. What happens in 2020? I want to get through this pandemic, and I feel confident about 2020. But 2024 is where my concern is, because he is such. He's really refined the GOP. How you can't replicate it. So what becomes? How does that philosophy influence the people who are coming up in 2024? And what does that leadership look like? What does the GOP look like then?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. It's less about like who's going to be the nominee. I get that question a lot. Is it going to be this person or that person? You can fill in the blanks.
Right,
I don't want to, conjecture. It's less about that, more important of what the base, the people listening to this wonderful program, are going to demand. We have to demand strict immigration. We have to demand renegotiated deals with China. We have to demand a challenge in the ruling class consensus. We have to demand to be a party of people that shower before work and shower after work, a working class, middle class party. That's what we have to demand. And that's why I wrote the book, is because I think President Trump is going to chart a new direction for the Republican Party for the better. Let the Democrats be the party of the ruling class snobbish elites on the coast. I want to represent what you called in your terrific book, by the way, Flyover Nation. You can't govern a country that you don't know about. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, but it was terrific book. And that articulates the MAGA doctrine. That was almost like it could have almost been a precursor. You could have wrote my intro, if you will, because that talks about how President Trump has brought dignity back to forgotten America. Let the Democrats rule Malibu, Manhattan, San Francisco, and Santa Clara. That's fine. I mean, you're president for all Americans, but politically, let them dominate there. What about the industrial base to our country?
Right.
What about our policemen, our firefighters, the union workers? That's the part of the country that I think has made this country the greatest country ever to exist in the history of the world. President Trump knew this instinctively. President Trump has brought a voice back to forgotten America, and I believe the more the Republican Party learns from this, the better, and that we will be successful in the future.
Well, this book, I think that even if someone out there is an independent or even a Democrat, I think to really understand Republicanism now and this philosophy, I think you need to read the book, The MAGA Doctrine, the only ideas that will win the future. I also think, and Charlie, I think that this book I think really puts to words it's got kind of like a blueprint also for the big tent that Republicans always said that they wanted but never were able to achieve before. Charlie Kirk, always a pleasure. Turning Point USA, the book, The MAGA Doctrine, the only ideas that will win the future, available where books are sold, and including Amazon if people, don't want to leave their isolation. Charlie, thank you. God bless. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Dana. You bet. Thanks.
Of course.
Bye.